I continue to be bewildered by this fascination of adapting animation to live action. I just don't understand it. Could someone explain to me why you would want to watch a beat-for-beat recreation of an original classic, but just done worse? Where is the value in this? I know where the value is for the studios. They're making an ungodly amount of money. The worst perpetrator of this is definitely Disney. They were the ones to popularize the trend of taking beautiful hand-drawn animation and throwing it back on screen in the form of CGI sludge. And now it seems like people like DreamWorks wants in on the action. The making of such media is a thankless task, and the experience of watching it pales in comparison to the original in nearly every way. Why not just, I don't know, watch or rewatch the superior original? As I asked in my Little Mermaid review last year, is the question of what this would look like in live action really all that interesting? Especially when you could instead be watching the beautiful animation painstakingly hand-drawn by an army of talented artists. In my opinion, Netflix's Avatar: The Last Airbender, it's suffering from all the worst issues that plague Disney's live-action attempts. And I'm not going to claim there hasn't been some good animation to live-action just translations in the past, but there is a key to their success. They stand as something significantly unique to the original source material. This is also why I don't really harp on about movies, comics, or books being remade into film the same way. Yes, you are telling the same story, but moving it out of one medium to another, transferring it in a way special and specific to that art form. Now, animation and live action have advantages unique only to them, but in order to tap into that full potential, you have to do something, that may be a little scary for studios. You have to make changes for the medium. The best example I can point to is actually from Disney, and it's The Jungle Book. This is one of their few actually good translations. This is because it's very different from the animated version. Yes, there is some imagery and references to the original, but the characters, tone, and even the story are distinctly its own thing, as it combines elements from the original with parts of the book and a sprinkle of, The Lion King. It's a darker world, more self-serious, and it's captured in the realism of the brilliant modern effects. It has a reason to exist by itself, especially when compared to the lighthearted and feel-good first take in that animated version. The other great example is actually Netflix itself with the recent One Piece, a show that captures the irreverent nature of the manga and pays service to the popular anime, but wasn't afraid to find its own cartoonish style that could work in live action. It's goofy and it's over the top, but leans into it in a way that even the animation couldn't, because this live action setting, it just lends to an additional level of absurdism. A bizarro mix of knowing how much to take from the source and when to diverge in big ways. Avatar: The Last Airbender, it understands none of this. It has one goal: take the imagery we know from the beloved animated show and remake it in live action. Let me emphasize that this corner of filmmaking, this feels so anti-imagination, creatively bankrupt, and boring. The Last Airbender is already a TV show. The movement from one medium to the next, it's already a much smaller jump. The original is one of the best TV shows ever made. What is the point in making another TV show telling the exact same abridged story with minimal just cosmetic changes? Something that ejects nothing but realism into a world that actually benefited more from the expressionist freedom given in animation. Where is the value when I can just go watch the vastly superior original? Far as I can see, this has no reason to exist, and it's a textbook definition of pointless. I heard this rumor a while back that the original showrunners had wanted Netflix to create an original story set in the world of Avatar, but let it be its own thing. Now, wouldn't that be something? But creating new things, it's hard. Why do that when you could just safely vomit back up things we already know onto screen? Now, I'll give them props for this looking like Avatar, and they did a great job bringing the world to life in live action, but it has none of the spirit. As one of my favorite film critics, Roger Ebert, once said, "It knows the notes, but it can't compose the music." That's exactly what this series is. It's a long series of, hey, remember when this was in a better show? It fails to bring the core of what people loved, the mixing of lighthearted comedy with darker and more mature themes, the great characters with punchy dialogue and animated expressions, the exciting expansion of the world as we learn more as we journey with the characters and they mature within the story. Weirdly, the showrunners said they were aiming this at a more mature fan base that grew up, but in doing so, they seem to have made the show even more immature than its cartoon counterpart. This version, it clearly has just zero trust in the viewer and thinks our brains are about the size of an acorn or something. We need to be spoon-fed everything in the form of long-winded exposition. When it's not remaking exact frames from the show, It is stopping the audience, sitting them down, and having info dumps in semicircles. Mind-numbing exposition is bad enough, but like I said before, the movie lacks the animated counterpart's playful and fun dialogue. This is some of the worst scripted lines I've seen in a show for a while. I see a lot of people going after the young actors and actresses for their stiff or forced performances, and I'm going to say that seems a bit unfair. Even the most veteran actor would have a hard time making this clunky material work. And the young cast does seem to be trying and giving it their all. They often channel the base of the character, but lack the writing to bring them fully to life. The screenwriters too often rely on having the characters voice exactly what they are feeling in the moment, a classic hallmark of badly written dialogue. And the writing has no excuse to be this sloppy, considering they already had an entire template written out for them, and yet the writers consistently feel the need to address things in these explicit terms. Even the beginning of the show opens with Aang's entire full backstory before jumping to Katara and Sokka discovering him in an iceberg. This is just in case you might get a little confused. Now, I know I just said I wanted things to be different, and believe me, I do. I was relieved every time there was a single scene I hadn't seen before. Yet there's still something to be said about basic storytelling. What is more effective? Shockingly finding the truth with Aang and feeling that grief as we discover the tragedy at the same time? Or just spoon-feeding us the details and knowing what Aang will find before he does? One is narratively rewarding, and the other is done simply because the makers think we're kind of stupid and we're not going to get it. The same can be said about scenes with Omashu and Bumi. He is instantly revealed as Aang's old friend, which completely takes the wind out of the sails in those scenes, and it loses that fun twist at the end. The odd paradox here is this. I desperately wanted them to diverge from the source, but every time they did, which was rare, they sort of just fell on their face. Like adding scenes with the Fire Lord and Azula, two characters that really don't have any role in the story at this point, outside of just showing them off to fans. Wasting screen time they could have spent on other things, like fleshing out their main characters' dynamics to make their on-screen chemistry better. Katara loses a lot of her motherly personality, and Aang seems more burdened rather than this carefree kid that has to learn to take on responsibility. Aang's crush on Katara is completely removed. I'm not sure why, maybe the age difference between the actors, but it does make the show's remake of the Tunnel of Love sequence a little awkward, when there's no love, I guess? Aang isn't even in the scene, and it's about brotherly and sisterly love now. Like Frozen. And I'm kind of tired of people just ripping that off of Frozen, because even Disney's done it multiple times. The issue, though, is they didn't replace Katara and Aang's relationship with a new angle, so it just makes scenes between the two fall just really flat. And I'm not here just to rain on people's parade, okay? For many, just seeing the scenes they love being recreated, that's going to be enough. I do understand that, even if I can't fully agree with it. A desire to know what animation in a lifelike setting would look like, this can be intriguing. The problem is the effects are very rough and uneven. Sometimes things will look spectacular, and other times look, about on par with Arrowverse era CGI. It gave me a little bit of whiplash. I don't fault the effects artists for the inconsistencies. This was a massive undertaking for a TV show, with a budget spread over 8 episodes. It's sprawling with a magic system that incorporates a lot of choreography as it's rooted in martial arts. All things considered, I think they did a commendable job, especially on the CGI environments and some of the character models. The worst of the stuff is actually probably the flying and airbending. Nothing really moves naturally or realistically, which isn't great in a show called, The Last Airbender. On that note, the animated show was rooted in fast-paced, energetic action. Here the choreography can be often inconsistent, with impressive sequences one moment, and then the next, lazy scenes of characters just throwing particle effects at one another. Once again, something like One Piece got away with shoddy visuals because they embraced a cartoonish aesthetic. The fact they looked corny and silly, that was part of the world's charm. This Avatar, however, takes itself way too seriously, all the way down to Sokka's moody, frumpy frown. It wants this to be a grounded world that we can fully accept like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars. And don't get me wrong, the show does a much better job than something like Rings of Power or Wheel of Time in bringing its world to life. Not because the visuals are better, but because it doesn't spend most of its runtime butchering the source material. But by being so serious, it also loses a bit of that innocent magic. And it makes the dark moments hit less hard. Harry Potter was a great example of a franchise that was able to balance the irreverent, innocent fun as it aged and matured into becoming a darker and more dramatic epic. The original Avatar cartoon It really did something similar, starting more innocent with episodic stories and becoming more serialized and mature. By starting out too dramatic right out the gate, this show kind of cuts the legs out from under itself. As much as I can harp on how pointless this all is, this isn't a disaster on the same level as M. Night Shyamalan's first ill-fated attempt. Those who want to see something that visually captures the world and characters will, to some degree, I think, be satisfied. But to me, I can't get over how much more fun this would have been if it was a completely new and fresh story, while successfully capturing the world. A new adventure and new classic that doesn't have to be burdened by comparisons to the vastly superior original. Because even though I can admire the visuals, when they, are actually good, they don't hold a candle for me to the unique and inspired animation that live action, it can really only approximate and imitate. So even though this isn't the worst thing I've ever seen, it has nothing of its own to add to the conversation. It is the exact same story with most changes being these attempts to condense down the 20-episode runtime to 8 by just reshuffling events around. No new takes on ideas, no exploration of these characters or world outside of what we know and what we are already familiar with. To date, I'm only about halfway through the show. Will I finish it? I'm going to be honest, probably not. I'm more inspired to go back and rewatch the original and Legend of Korra than I am in finishing this. Maybe that's the best thing this can do. Redirect people to the original so they can experience one of the best shows of the last few decades. Or even better, put a little money in Michael and Brian's pockets so they can go and hopefully make something new and refreshing, something with a little more life. But those are just my thoughts on the new Avatar: The Last Airbender live-action show. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Until next time, keep those reels turning. Thank you.